Right, let's talk about cutting Doflex, shall we? So on the SDX, the auto blade sensor function will automatically read this and it will probably cut it twice. And I'm going to talk you through that whole process. On your CM machines, and I still have my 900 and my 600 and all my original ones, I find that with a brand new blade, you need to put your pressure on 8, which is very unusual. No, that's not correct. Pressure on 4. And your blade depth on 8. So you need more force behind that blade because there are no fibres in the Doflex, and you need a deeper blade depth, so it needs to get through a thicker material. So pressure 4, blade 8, and speed as ever on full, okay, which is 5. I find that when you do that, it cuts it in one pass on a CM machine. On the SDX, it's going to give it 2 passes. So you really do need to make sure that your mat is nice and sticky, because we don't want that Doflex to move even a fraction of a millimetre, because it won't cut again in the same place. Sometimes, if I'm having a bit of a day when things aren't going right, I will take my standard blade and housing and put it in my SDX and use the manual settings for it, but it's entirely up to you. But your SDX will cut it twice. So I've got a brand new standard mat for today's filming, and I might need to retack it as we go through, but that's fine. But it is strong enough as new to be able to put this on, and it will hold it in place. But rather than with a piece of card where you just press it down with your hand, I want you to take your spatula and I want you to burnish this down, because we need to make sure that that plastic doesn't move. Okay, so we're going to press it down nice and firmly, making sure we're going into the corners, because on the SDX with the auto blade, if this lifts, this top edge lifts, this is where it goes back and reads the depth. So it starts by reading the depth, then when it does its second cut, it goes back and checks again. If that's lifted slightly off your mat, it will tell you that it can't cut it because it's too thick. So you need to make sure that it's really well pressed down at the top of your mat. So then we're going to open up our machine and we're going to load this mat in. So as ever, mat goes in with the arrow on your SDX facing forward. On the CM machines, it doesn't matter which way you load the mat, but on this one it does, because on the SDX, the customers worldwide asked for a hole to be put in it so that you could hang it up. We're going to put that up to the rollers and we're going to press the load mat button. Keep hold of your mat as well, don't let it go, because it can pull back slightly and then the rollers can't grip it. Now, I haven't got the official USB yet, so I've got my files on an old USB, so that yours will look slightly different, but your files will be exactly the same. And I've got a chair with wheels on, so I'm just going to move over because my arms are looking for treats. So to retrieve our stencil, we're going to go into Retrieve Data and into your USB. And you'll see I've got all sorts on here. So bear with as I just find the files that I need, because I've got all sorts of different things on these USBs. I've got the animals one from the animal USB that we did. So I'm going to go into the USB, click on that. So this is a longer workaround than yours will be. You've got your papers on there and you've got your projects. Now we're calling them projects, they're actually stencils, but in some of the stencils there's 3 or 4 layers. So we've just put them in as a group, as a project. So let's do quite a simple one to start with. Let's do the Art Deco, and we will do, let's have a look at flower 1 and see what that looks like. So this is nice, we've got the iris here. So I'm going to set that onto the mat and press OK. Now we leave them purposely separate, so you've got an outside edge and you've got the detail, and they're 2 separate files. So if you want to move it or resize it, you need to group it. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to teach you a bit on the scan and cut while we're doing these as well. So we go to Edit, and we multiple select, which is the 3 red squares. We want everything that's on the mat, so we select the full mat image, and then we press OK because we're finished on that screen. Then we go back into Object Edit because we still want to change that file, and we press Group. And now I can move that as one piece. The reason that we leave them separate is so that you don't have to go into Canvas Workspace to ungroup them if you want to cut that design into a piece of card and get rid of the outside edge. That's why we do it. And I know it's a bit of a faff when you've got 3 or 4 layers, because you have to add and bring them on and group each one individually. I'm going to show you that as we go through as well. But it's better than every single file you're having to send into Canvas and send back, because that's a faff again. If you're not working on a phone or a tablet and you've got to go and sit in front of your computer, it's much easier for us to do it that way. So I'm just going to move this in slightly, because I always tend to do that anyway when I'm cutting something, something that's a little bit more difficult to cut, because I don't want it cutting right up to the corner. I want to give the machine almost like a little bit of a run up to it, if you like. And then I'm going to just make this a little bit smaller, because otherwise it's going to take a while to cut, which is fine, but you know, we want to get on with lots of fun bits, don't we? So I'm going to press OK and keep going. And it's interesting, isn't it? I've just resized that stencil automatically without thinking about how amazing that is. So you imagine watching somebody on Create and Craft right now with a set of 4 A4 stencils, and you're probably looking at the price of that the USB is going to be, but they're not resizable. And it's interesting, when you use a product for so long, you become quite blasé about what it does. That's amazing. So you could have that stencil that big or that big, and millimetre increments in between. It's just amazing. So if you're watching these videos and you don't own a Scan and Cut, I would seriously recommend that you get one. And I know it's a considered purchase, but think about the money that this is going to save you. 100 stencils, and you can manipulate them. And I'm going to teach you some really cool stuff that you can do with them in Canvas as well. So it's just amazing. So I'm going to press please select, and we want to cut. Now this is important. So when you then go into I want you to go into your spanner here on your SDX. On your CM machine, you will just do the settings that I've told you. So speed 5, pressure 4, blade depth 8. That's with the new standard blade. Don't use your deep cut blade, it's too hard for it, it's too harsh. But here I've actually changed my cut pressure on my auto to -2, because you can adjust the pressures as well if you want. But I want you to make sure that the cut amount at the bottom is on 1 mil. Now, normally I would say make sure it's on 0.5, because you don't want it to be too harsh. But if I have it on 0.5, it will cut it 3 or 4 times. Having it on 1 mil allows it to cut it twice. And because it's a dense product and it's not going to start tearing or ripping or scrunching up, we can get away with having it on the 1 mil. So when you're cutting your Doflex, make sure it's on that setting. And then we just press OK, and then we're ready to start. And it's going to take 5 minutes to cut that stencil. So in that time, you then go off and you do all your other bits and pieces that you want to do. And we decided to do a USB with stencils on, because I am absolutely starting to dip my toe into mixed media. But I know there's still a lot of people out there that either don't want to commit to a new craft just yet for the, you know, the expense of it, aren't sure about if they're going to enjoy it, aren't sure about investing in stencils and rice papers and paint, which are all amazing products, and I now own a lot of them. They just want to have a taster and see what different things you can do with a stencil. So I'm going to try really, really hard to do different demos here than I do through the shows, because I've got to 15 techniques and there's still loads more that I can think of doing. And we're bringing in different products. So we're going to do some stuff with UPO and alcohol inks. We're going to use the waste from your stencil to create another picture. We're going to do paper piecing. We're going to do all sorts of really fun stuff. So I think it's a really good way of just dipping your toe in, not spending too much money on it. You'll need to get yourself some Doflex, but again, you know, we're not talking hundreds of pounds here. As long as you've already got your Scan and Cut, it's a really accessible craft to get into. You can start getting your inks back out again, get your double-sided sheets out and use your gilding flakes, use your embossing folders, use your foils, all that kind of thing that we get, because we get really excited, don't we, about it? And then we put it in a cupboard and then we forget about it. And then something else new comes along and we go to that. So it's really, really good to just get all those things out and just have a play with them, and this is going to enable you to do that. Now, looking at this screen now, what it's done is it's increased the time that it's going to take to 7 minutes. So it would have been 8 or 9 minutes. And the reason it's done that is because it's told me how long it knows it's going to take to cut the file originally. And then when it's read the depth of the Doflex, it's doubled it because it needs to cut it twice, even though we've got it on 1 mil. And that's another reason why sometimes I will put my standard blade from my CM machine in there, because it will cut it in one pass. so it speeds up the process. So it's entirely up to you. If you're new to an SDX and you're thinking, oh, well, now I've got to go and buy another blade, you don't have to. Your auto blade will do it. But if you want it quicker and you've already got one, then it's perfect. Just make sure that your blade is nice and sharp, because you don't want a blunt edge trying to cut through plastic, because it won't work. The other thing that we found with Doflex recently as well is with the Pro Cut from Kit and Caboodle, the die cutting machine. If you see me on air recently, I put Doflex through it with a regular tattered lace die. The Doflex that we're going to have on the show for the stencils is thicker, so you need to get a lighter weight Doflex to put it through with your dies. But then you can do all those kind of techniques with those as well. So this isn't just about the techniques that you can do with the Stencils USB. This is the techniques that you can do with any stencils, which is really cool as well. So I'm going to let this finish, and then once it's finished, we'll come back and I'll show you the reveal. Okay, so we'll just pause there, and then we'll come back and show you when it's finished. Right, so it's finished cutting now. So it went round twice. It's in exactly the right place, which is fabulous. So it's cut perfectly second time round. Sorry, it is a bit of a noise, isn't it? I'm going to unload this now, and what you need to be aware of is that it's not going to leave all the bits behind. Some of it will come out with the bits still in, but they're cut, all right? It's because it's plastic, and it's not, the mat isn't strong enough to, it doesn't grab the fibre, there's no fibres for it to grab. So you've got, you can see there, you've got some in and some out, and you'd be like, well, Mel said it would cut in 2 passes. It does. Look, you just need to pull these pieces out. You need to peel them out. So it's plastic, so you just need to get in there and just do a little bit of pulling these pieces out. Now, I wish I'd done this for all of mine, but I didn't, because I didn't think about it, because I was prepping demos, and as always, I'm learning as I go. What I would suggest you do is get yourself some bags or some little boxes or something, and keep these pieces. And I know that sounds ridiculous, and on some of them you'll just be like, I'm not keeping all those because it's too detailed and I won't know where they go, and that's fine. But for the bigger pieces like this, I would keep them in a bag with the stencil so that you know that you've got them safe. And the reason for that is, if you're going to use them to ink through, you might want to use these pieces. So if, let's say, for example, you were inking through this flower, you would want to protect these pieces from the ink so you can pop them back in. So it's a really good thing to do, especially on bigger open projects like this one. I would absolutely suggest that you keep the pieces, all right? And I know it sounds like, oh, well, that's just, I'm going to have loads of things to store, but it's worth it. Because otherwise, next time you've either got to cut it out of card or you've got to cut it out of Doflex again. So just a heads up on what I would have done if I'd thought about it. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. I would have absolutely done that, and I have ended up cutting extra stencils just to get these waste bits, so just think about that as you go in. Some of them there's like loads of little pieces in, and you'd be like, I'm never going to put those back in, I'll do a different technique. But for this, it's definitely worth it. If you get a little awkward bit like this bit where it's going right into a point, don't pull at it, just be patient and just get all these little bits out, okay? I know you want to get on with the fun bit, but we have to do this bit. And this is just fabulous to now be able to have our own stencils. I'm just super excited about seeing what you do with them, because everybody will come up with something slightly different. And it's been, you know, I craft every day of my life when I, you know, for my job, and it's wonderful, but it's nice when you do something completely different to what you normally do, because once you do one thing, it then sparks an idea for the next thing, and then the next thing, and it just, I could have just carried on for days, I think. Now there, I've got a little bit that just wants to be a bit awkward. So just be very gentle with it. And if you get any little stray bits like this, just snip them away, because when you're going through with ink, and it's like a little hair almost, a little strand of plastic. Oh, need to get the stem out. Just don't just pull at it or leave it. Just get your scissors in and do a little bit cutting. But look at that. How fabulous is that as a stencil? And you can have that literally in hundreds of different sizes. That's bonkers. That's scan and cut. That's amazing. Right, so I've shown you how to cut Doflex. I'm just going to recap again. On your SDX, you're going to make sure that you've got a nice sticky mat. You're going to go in and select your design. You're going to group it together. You're going to put your Doflex on your mat and press it down firmly, making sure that your mat is sticky enough. Then you're going to press cut, and you're going to go into that little spanner in the cut menu, and you're going to make sure it's on cut amount 1mm, and then it will cut it twice. And then you're going to let it cut it twice, take it off, and have all your pieces ready. On your CM machine, you're going to make sure you've got a really sticky mat. You're then going to set your speed on 5, your pressure on 4, and your blade depth with your standard blade housing, which is the blue one, and a new blade or a newish blade on 8. And that will cut through in one go. And as I said earlier, you can put your standard blade into your SDX if you want it to cut faster. It's just the SDX will do it twice, but those settings will cut through. And it's Doflex, not Mylar. Mylar is a different beast. Mylar is even denser. So we're working on the Doflex that we sell on Create and Craft. Those are the settings that you need. Right, I'm going to tidy my mat up, and then we're going to start with our first technique, which is very exciting. See you in a minute.